high on a granite cliff, 3,000 feet above a valley still wrapped in morning mist. A nest the size of a kitchen table held the most fragile kind of life. A single eagle chick, barely 2 weeks old, covered in soft white down, eyes still learning to focus on the world. Its parents had left at dawn as they always did, riding the first thermal currents of the day in search of food. The chick waited, tucked between sticks and dried grass, blissfully unaware that something was already circling above. Then the shadow came. Not one, not two. 5 griffin vultures descended from the ridgeline, their massive wingspans, nearly 9 feet wide, blocking the sun like a slow-moving storm. They were not there by accident. Vultures are patient. Vultures are intelligent. And vultures had been watching that nest for days. What happened in the next 4 minutes would be witnessed by a wildlife researcher named Marco Delgado, who had climbed that cliff at first light with a camera and no expectation of seeing anything extraordinary. He was wrong. This is the story of how one small creature, against every odd, survived, and what it teaches us about the hidden world of birds, survival, and the breathtaking complexity of nature. Before we go any further into this incredible story, I want to take a moment and ask you something, because this channel is built on community, and the people watching make every single video worth creating. Where are you watching this from right now? Are you settled in at home with a cup of coffee? Maybe you're out on a walk, listening through your earphones with the sky above you? Perhaps you're somewhere where you can actually look up and spot a bird or two while this plays? Drop it in the comments. Seriously, city, state, country, wherever you are. There is something genuinely wonderful about knowing that a story happening on a cliff in southern Europe is reaching someone in Texas, or Ontario, or rural New Zealand, or a suburb of Sydney. This story, the story of this eagle chick, is one that I believe deserves to be heard widely. Not just because it is dramatic, though it absolutely is, but because it pulls back the curtain on 2 of the most misunderstood birds in the world, the golden eagle and the griffin vulture. By the time this video ends, you will understand these animals in a way that most people never do. You will know how they hunt, how they raise their young, why vultures behave the way they do, and why a moment of apparent chaos on a cliff face actually reveals one of the most sophisticated ecological relationships on the planet. And if at any point this story moves you, if a detail stops you, if a moment makes you catch your breath, hit that like button. It tells us that stories like this one matter to you, and it helps more people find content that respects both the animals and the audience. Now, let us go back to that cliff. The Spanish Pyrenees in late April exist in a kind of suspended drama. The snow has not fully retreated. The higher peaks still wear white above the tree line, but down in the valleys, the rivers are swollen and fast and green with snowmelt. Wildflowers push through rocky soil that hasn't seen sun in 5 months. And high above all of it, on the southern face of a limestone ridge called the Sierra de Guara, the eagles have already been nesting for 6 weeks. Golden eagles, Aquila chrysitos, are not impulsive creatures. They do not build a new nest every year the way smaller birds do. Instead, a mated pair will return to the same nest, called an eyrie, year after year, adding new material each season until the structure becomes something almost architectural in its scale. The nest Marco Delgado had been monitoring for 3 seasons measured nearly 5 feet across and weighed an estimated 200 pounds. It was anchored into a shelf of rock that jutted outward over a sheer drop, invisible from below, accessible only by air, or, with considerable effort and proper equipment, by a determined researcher with a harness and a very good reason to be there. The female eagle, whom Marco had named Iberia in his field notes, not a scientific designation, just a quiet act of familiarity after hundreds of hours of observation, had laid 2 eggs that spring. This was typical. Golden eagles commonly lay 1 to 3 eggs per clutch, with 2 being the most frequent, but only 1 had hatched. The second egg, after the standard 40 to 45-day incubation period, had never opened. These losses are common. In the wild, every life that makes it past the first few weeks represents a series of small victories against probability. The surviving chick, which Marco noted simply as the chick in every entry, refusing to name it until he was more confident it would survive, had hatched on a Tuesday. By the following week, it had doubled in weight. By week 2, it was alert, reactive, and had developed the early signs of what would eventually become one of the most formidable visual systems in the animal kingdom. Golden eagles can see 8 times more sharply than a human being. They can detect movement from nearly 2 miles away. They can track a rabbit running at full speed across broken terrain and calculate an interception point with a precision that no targeting computer has yet matched. But at 2 weeks old, the chick was still soft, still dependent, still vulnerable in every sense that matters. Its parents, Iberia and the male Marco, called simply the male, an older bird with a notched primary feather on his left wing, had established a predictable routine. Dawn departure. Return by mid-morning with food. A second foraging run in the afternoon. Return before dusk. The chick was never left alone for more than 4 hours at a stretch, until the morning the vultures came. Griffon vultures, Gyps fulvus, are among the largest birds on the European continent. An adult male can weigh up to 25 pounds, with a wingspan stretching to 9.5 feet. They are built for a very specific purpose: locating and consuming carrion. Their long, bare necks, often pale pink or cream in color, are an adaptation that allows them to reach deep inside a carcass without their feathers becoming contaminated. Their digestive systems are extraordinary. They can process bacteria that would be lethal to virtually any other animal. But on this particular morning, the 5 vultures that descended toward Marco's monitored nest were not strictly following the role nature assigned them. This is something researchers have documented with increasing frequency in recent years. Griffon vultures, when food is scarce, will opportunistically investigate nests containing chicks or eggs. They are not predators by design, but hunger reshapes behavior. And the spring had been lean. The valley below offered few large carcasses. The vultures were circling wider, searching lower, taking risks they would not ordinarily take. Marco saw them coming from his observation point on a rocky outcrop, roughly 180 meters from the nest. He counted 5 individuals. He noted the time, 7:42 in the morning. He noted that neither Iberia nor the male was visible in the sky. He picked up his camera, pressed record, and said nothing. What he captured over the next 4 minutes is now among the most studied pieces of wildlife footage in European ornithology. Not because of what the vultures did, but because of what happened when they arrived at the nest and found that it was not, after all, undefended. The chick was alone, but the chick was not helpless. Even at 2 weeks old, the instinct encoded into every golden eagle that has ever lived told it to do one thing in the face of threat: make yourself known. Make yourself loud. Make yourself as large as possible. The chick spread its tiny wings that were still more fluff than feather, still weeks away from any kind of functional flight, and opened its beak and screamed into the mountain air with everything it had. The sound carried, further than the vultures expected, further than Marco expected, further perhaps than even the physics of the morning should have allowed. Let us pause the story for a moment, because if we are going to understand what happens next, we need to understand the griffon vulture, not as a villain, not as a symbol of death, but as what it actually is: one of the most ecologically vital animals on the European continent, and one of the most unjustly feared. Griffon vultures do not hunt in the way that eagles hunt. They do not stalk, chase, or kill. Their entire biology is optimized around a different strategy. One that is, when you understand it fully, nothing short of extraordinary. They soar. A griffon vulture can spend 8 to 10 hours in the air on a single day without flapping its wings more than a handful of times. They exploit thermal updrafts, columns of warm air that rise from sun-heated ground, with a mastery that aviation engineers have spent decades trying to understand and replicate. They can cover 150 to 200 kilometers in a single day. They can reach altitudes of 11,000 feet. And all the while, they are watching. Their eyesight is roughly equivalent to that of other raptors, sharp, wide field, adapted for motion detection across large distances. But it is their social behavior that makes them truly remarkable hunters of the dead. When one vulture descends toward a carcass, others at great distances observe and follow. This creates a cascade effect. A single discovery can draw dozens of birds within minutes. In some regions, a large carcass can attract more than 100 vultures within half an hour of the first arrival. This behavior is not just efficient, it is essential. In the ecosystems where griffon vultures are present, they serve as the primary biological recyclers of large animal remains. Without them, carcasses decompose slowly, spreading pathogens into soil and water. Studies in Spain, where griffon vulture populations are among the largest in the world, have demonstrated that regions with healthy vulture populations show significantly lower rates of certain soil-borne diseases in livestock. There are approximately 25,000 griffon vultures in Spain today. The population, which fell sharply in the 20th century due to poisoning, habitat loss, and direct killing, has recovered substantially since protective legislation was introduced in the 1980s. They nest colonially, sometimes in groups of dozens of pairs on the same cliff face, and they are intensely social animals, traveling together, feeding together, and roosting together in ways that suggest a level of community behavior uncommon among large raptors. They are not, under normal circumstances, a threat to a healthy eagle nest. But these were not normal circumstances. The 5 birds that descended on the eyrie that morning were juveniles, identified by Marco by the streaked brown plumage that characterizes griffon vultures in their first 3 to 4 years of life, before they develop the creamy white body and dark flight feathers of adulthood. Juvenile vultures are less experienced, more impulsive, and more likely to investigate unconventional food sources. They were also, Marco later estimated based on their body condition, genuinely hungry. The winter had been cold and long, and the transition to spring, typically when vulture food sources increase as animals emerge and the old and weak begin to struggle, had been delayed by an unusually cold March. Hunger and youth are a combination that overrides caution. The first vulture landed on the edge of the nest. This is the moment that stops people when they watch the footage. Because a griffon vulture on the ground, or on a nest ledge, is a completely different visual experience from a griffon vulture in the air. In the air, they are graceful, almost majestic, gliding shapes against blue sky. On the ground, they are enormous, hunched, their naked pink necks curling forward with an almost reptilian deliberateness. The first bird on the nest edge was easily 3 times the size of the chick it was looking at. The chick screamed again. The vulture tilted its head. And then, 8 seconds after the first landing, something appeared on the southern horizon that changed everything. A shape, a silhouette, moving fast and low against the ridgeline, wings half-folded, descending at an angle that every prey animal in the Pyrenees is hardwired to recognize as a committed attack posture. Iberia had heard her chick. From how far away, Marco could not be certain. But based on the speed and angle of her return trajectory, he later estimated she had been at least 3 kilometers from the nest when the chick's alarm call reached her. She had not returned at cruising speed. She had returned at strike speed, roughly 80 miles per hour in a controlled stoop, feathers pressed flat, talons forward. What happened next lasted less than 30 seconds. But it would take ornithologists years to fully process what they were seeing. 80 miles per hour. That is not a metaphor. That is not an approximation for dramatic effect. That is the documented strike speed of a golden eagle in a committed attack dive. A speed reached by folding the wings tight against the body and using gravity and body mass as weapons. A golden eagle weighs between 6 and 15 pounds. At 80 miles per hour, the force of that impact is sufficient to break the spine of a rabbit, the wing of a crane, or, as has been documented, though rarely, to knock a small deer off its footing on a hillside. 5 griffon vultures, each outweighing the eagle by a factor of 2 or 3, were on or immediately around her nest. Iberia did not slow down. She hit the nearest vulture, the juvenile that had landed on the nest edge, with a shoulder strike that sent the bird tumbling backward off the ledge in a chaos of brown feathers and sound. The impact was audible on Marco's recording equipment from 180 meters away. The vulture recovered in midair, caught a thermal, and climbed away, fast and in the direction of the ridge. The remaining 4 scattered, not immediately. There was a moment, perhaps 2 seconds, perhaps 3, where the group instinct of the vultures created hesitation. 4 large birds against one smaller, faster, ferociously motivated one. In a pure weight contest, the math favored the vultures. But weight is not what golden eagles bring to a confrontation. What they bring is precision and purpose. Iberia landed on the nest, spread both wings to their full span, 7 feet, tip to tip, and positioned herself directly over the chick. Her posture was not defensive in any passive sense. Her wings were not folded around the chick protectively. They were spread outward and forward, her head down, her beak open, her entire posture broadcasting a single, unambiguous message: come closer and discover what happens. The vultures did not come closer. They circled once, twice, riding the same thermal column, perhaps recalculating. Then the second adult eagle, the male, with his notched primary feather unmistakable in Marco's zoom lens, appeared from the north, slower than Iberia, but equally purposeful, and landed on a rock outcrop 6 feet above the nest. That was enough. The 5 vultures peeled away in separate directions, and within 45 seconds of Iberia's arrival, the sky above the nest was empty of everything except a pair of eagles and the particular silence that follows sudden violence. Marco sat on his rock for a long time after, his camera still running, recording footage he wasn't yet processing. The chick was alive. Not unharmed. One of the vultures had made brief contact, and Marco could see a small area of disturbed down on the chick's right side. But alive. Alert. And within minutes of its mother's landing, pressing itself against Iberia's chest with the absolute and unapologetic confidence of a creature that has just been reminded that it is protected. Now let us slow down. Because the story that Marco witnessed, and that you have just heard, raises questions that deserve careful answers. The first question most people ask: why were the eagle parents not together at the nest? This is normal behavior, and it reflects one of the most important realities of golden eagle parenting. Providing food for a growing chick requires constant effort. A 2-week-old golden eagle chick needs to consume roughly 15 to 20% of its body weight in food every single day. As the chick grows, and golden eagle chicks grow fast, reaching near adult size within 10 weeks, that daily food requirement increases dramatically. By the time a chick is 5 weeks old, the parents are essentially hunting continuously, from first light to last, to meet demand. It is physically impossible for both birds to be present at the nest at all times and also keep the chick fed. The nest site itself is the defense, or it should be. The second question: would the vultures have harmed the chick if Iberia had not returned? The honest answer is probably not fatally, but the outcome is uncertain. Griffon vultures are not equipped to kill live prey efficiently. Their beaks are designed for tearing soft tissue from carcasses, not for dispatching healthy animals. But a juvenile vulture, hungry and investigating, could have caused serious injury to a 2-week-old chick through accidental contact, displacement from the nest, or simple crushing weight. Nest abandonment events, where a chick is displaced from the nest edge and falls, are documented in the literature and are almost always fatal. The margin between survival and catastrophe on that particular morning was measured in seconds. The third question, and this is the one that stayed with Marco longest, the one he writes about in his published account of the event. How did Iberia hear the chick from 3 kilometers away? The answer involves the physics of sound, the geometry of mountain terrain, and a sensitivity of hearing in large raptors that we are still, frankly, working to fully understand. Sound behaves differently at altitude. It travels further in cold, dense morning air. Mountain faces focus and amplify certain frequencies, and the alarm call of a golden eagle chick, a high, sharp, sustained note quite unlike any other bird vocalization in its range, is specifically structured, researchers believe, to carry maximum distance in exactly the kind of acoustic environment where eagle nests are built. Evolution, in other words, built the distress call of the chick to reach its mother across distances that seem, at first hearing, impossible. Which brings us back to the word Marco used when he first shared this footage at a conference in Madrid, 18 months after the event. He called it a miracle. A colleague corrected him gently, pointing out that what had occurred was entirely explicable through biology, physics, and behavioral ecology. Marco nodded. Then he said, "I know, and I still call it a miracle. The two are not mutually exclusive." And that, my friends, is where I want to leave you today. Not with the dramatic image of the eagle striking the vulture, though that image is extraordinary, but with Marco's words, because they capture something true about what it means to understand nature deeply. The more you know, the more remarkable it becomes, not less, not flattened into mechanism and data. The science does not remove the wonder. The science is the wonder. An eagle chick screaming on a mountain ledge, a call that travels 3 kilometers through cold morning air. A mother arriving at exactly the speed required. A small creature pressed against warm feathers, alive. Every single element of that story is explained by biology, and every single element of it is breathtaking. Before you go, I have 2 things to ask of you. First, if this story reached you, if any part of it made you feel something, leave a like right now. It takes 1 second, and it tells the algorithm that stories like this one deserve to be seen by more people. People who might never have thought much about eagles or vultures or the extraordinary complexity of a mountain cliff in April. Second, tell me in the comments, what surprised you most? Was it the vulture's behavior, the distance Iberia traveled, the way the chick instinctively called out, or something else entirely? I read every comment on this channel, every single one, and your answers genuinely shape what stories we tell next. If you are not yet subscribed, this is the moment. Hit that subscribe button and the bell beside it. We publish new stories every week, stories built on real research, real footage, real science, told in a way that respects both the animals and your intelligence. And speaking of the next story, stay on screen, because when this video ends, you are going to see a thumbnail appear that I am genuinely proud of. It involves a different continent, a different predator, and a moment that scientists watched happen in real time.